Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is One Punch Man, Season 1, Episode 13, Return of the Hero. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happened within this episode. So the episode begins with Saitama and Genos doing some shopping, and Genos spots an action figure for the hero King. We then see King walking down the street with a sweater on and a cap, trying to hide his identity. However, it does end up being revealed by a villain named Tongue Stretcher, who is like a frog man or reptile man, amphibian man, really, who's trying to be pervy to some girls with his tongue. And basically, all King has to do is stand there. A sound starts to play out of his body, and Tongue Stretcher becomes so terrified that he bows down, apologizes, and begs not to be killed, ending that incident. However, just after King leaves that incident, which Genos and Saitama are spying on because they've noticed that King is there, King is then confronted by a machine robot called G4, who was sent by the organization. And they decide to watch King. However, then King makes an excuse that he can't fight at full power when he has to go to the washroom. So he runs over to the washroom and basically has a huge freak out while he's in the bathroom, revealing himself to be a fake and cowardly hero. Like, he's a coward. He just happened to get lucky and be at the scenes of some other hero's work, and therefore gained the accomplishments and moniker of the strongest and the S-class ranking by basically taking Saitama's credit. We then flash back to like Vaccine Man's defeat and King's lying in his guts. We then do the Marugori flashback where again, he's at the scene when like the reporters and other officials come because Saitama left right away. And he basically, once he realizes that Genos is fighting G4, he then takes the opportunity to run for it, and he runs home where he decides he's going to play the new game he bought. And when he looks up, he happens to notice that Saitama's in his apartment, and he asks him how he got there. And Saitama tells him he left the window open, but he points out that he's on the 22nd floor. And Saitama basically then is like, I was trying to see, like, learn more about you. I was watching. I saw you run. I've come to ask you why you've run. Are you so strong that you're too bored to fight or unwilling to fight or, whatever the case may be? We then have a giant crow that bursts into the window, and Saitama stops it with one hand while King goes in his pants and is freaking out, completely cowardly. And Saitama asks him if he's all right, which causes King to then flash back to the octopus claw man who had given him the scars over his eye, and how at that time too he had his eyes closed, and then somebody asked him if he was all right, and when he opened his eyes he saw a much younger, before he lost his hair, Saitama, who had defeated that monster. And he realizes it's the same person. And once Saitama defeats the crow, he then apologizes for taking his credit and whatnot. But basically, he doesn't want to be a hero and take credit, but he's also too cowardly to come out and say it or to quit. And so, because of his indecision, it's just kind of continued on. And Saitama then points out to him that, you're the people's hero. They love and adore you, flashing back to that action figure. And like, you need to make a decision. And if you're going to stay a hero, why don't you just become strong? Like, it's the easiest thing in the world, which for him, honestly, didn't sound like it was hard. Meanwhile, Genos is continuing his fight with G4, ultimately managing to defeat him, and he brings the broken parts to Dr. Kusano, who he asks to, if they're compatible with his body, use them to make him stronger. That Dr. Kusano then kind of feels like he's starting to lose track of his goals, so he points out, asking Genos, have you maybe done any sort of investigation into that cyborg since you decided to become a hero? And Genos basically says that he's going to defeat the cyborg, he's going to find him, but right now his main goal is to enter the top 10 of the S-class rank, because that's what his mentor's goal for him is. And Dr. Kusano then reluctantly agrees to make him stronger and try to add in some of G4's technology into Genos. Then we take a bit of a sidetrack over to the Hero Association. The new Hero Association has invited a lot of seedy characters, assassins, hitmen, rogues, those who are evil but not monsters there. And Sitch, who is giving the speech who had invited them all and is leading the Hero Association, is protected by Magic Trick Man, Blue Fire, and Heavy Tank Loincloth, who are all A-rank heroes with S-class combat abilities, according to Sitch, who's there to try to keep all of these ne'er-do-wells under control. And Speedo Sound Sonic also came. However, he's surprised that Saitama's not there. He thought Saitama lived in the headquarters. And basically it's like, well, if he's not here, let me reveal to everybody that you called us here to try to get us to help with all of the monsters that have been increasingly attacking people. But I'm not going to be a part of it. And he then walks away, trying to consider how he can find Saitama. And basically it's implied that Shibabawa, who made the World Doom prophecy 6 months ago, we assumed that the alien invasion at the end of season 1 was that event and it was countered. However, now they don't believe that anymore because there's been a drastic increase in the amount of monster attacks all throughout the world, and this of course is leading them to believe that maybe something else, maybe even worse than that, is going to be happening. And then at the very end of the episode, Sonic's walking away trying to think of ways to locate Saitama for his, one-sided rivalry. And then we also see Fubuki, who is also trying to find Saitama for something, though she's only seen briefly at the end of the episode. Which brings us now to the part of the episode where we will be ranking the episode, and as always, we're going to rank on our mostly objective ranking, which uses set values to determine the score, and then the personal ranking, which uses my opinion to determine the score. And we'll start, of course, with our mostly objective rank values. So we start with our single episode supporting character introductions. And, our multi-episode supporting character introductions. And we have the villains first, Tongue Stretcher, G4, Giant Crow. And then we have our bit part heroes, Magic Trick Man, Heavy Tank Loincloth. We'd have introduced Blue Fire before. He was at the restaurant with all of the people who didn't want to respond to, what was that guy's name? Mustache Man, the mustachio something or other. He had the mustache. Him. He was going to a terrifying city. That's where we saw him last. Anywho, with both of those, that's 2 points each, so that's a total of 4 points. Then we have our multi-season supporting character development, which is where we learn that King is not, in fact, meant to be a hero. He doesn't want to be a hero. He's just had terrible luck where he always seems to end up where monsters are, almost to the point where he worries that they may be attracted to him in some way, or something about him is attracting them because he always seems to be there. And then as soon as he'd look away, they'd be defeated, he'd be left at the scene, and then he would end up with the credit for it. And that's how he became known as the strongest man alive. And because of the flashbacks and everything, we realized that most of the credits that he's been getting were for Saitama's kills. And so that is worth 3 points, bringing us to 7 so far. Then we have some world building, which is worth 4 points. And this is the first time that we have heard mention by G4 of the organization. We don't know anything about it yet, but it has now been implied that there is some sort of organization. And then when we go to the hero meeting where they're trying to ask the villains, it's also there where they feel like something is organizing all of these increase in attacks of monsters, which leads to people wondering, this organization, maybe they're linked, but that's a bit of world building there. And then there was one negative to the episode, I felt, and that, of course, was the casual home invasion of Saitama. He basically just like follows King home, which I guess could be also considered stalking, and then just casually enters in through his open window on the 22nd floor and basically invites himself to stay. And even later, he comes back to play games in a little like small short scene at the end of the episode. So basically, I call it casual home invasion because obviously there's no ill intent. It's Saitama, but you're still invading someone's home. You're breaking in. Not even breaking. The window was open. But the point is, you are trespassing. That's negative. And so that is a 9 out of 10 for this episode. And as it is the first episode of season 2, it is in first place, Return of the Hero. Now, personally, I also did quite enjoy this episode. There were certain moments, like for example, when like the literal first scene of this episode is Saitama and Genos doing their shopping, and it opens with them talking while we see Genos' reflection in Saitama's bald head, which is funny, amusing. And then you also get to see like a little bit of their slice of life moments. Obviously, then we find out that King is a coward, and I mean, he looks tough, but then when he's freaking out, they purposely draw him to be hideously ugly. Unfortunately, makes really weird noise, like really weird faces, I should say. So that's not as enjoyable, but it's also funny how, like, you have to wonder really how nobody knew Saitama existed and was killing all of these really devastating, high impact monsters, and nobody noticed. Except they did notice, they just attributed it all to King, who is actually considers himself like an otaku who likes to just like stay holed up in his apartment playing games. There was also, of course, the fact that once again, Genos had an epic battle that's like highlighting just how boring Saitama's one punch end to fights is. And he was, fighting lasers and explosions, and his arm was like rocketing out and retracting. And then he brought the parts to Dr. Kusuno, where we see that he's kind of slipped from his original goal with his, adoration of Saitama, making him his mentor. We learn about a secret organization. This is always good. We're building up the lore. I like Speed of Sound Sonic. I think he's hilarious, and I love that he keeps coming back. So that was fun. Um, that he once again made a little cameo and once again has this one-sided rivalry with Saitama. And then we had Fubuki at the end, which she's obviously going into the abandoned part of City Z, which is where Saitama lives. And we're not really told exactly why she's looking for him, only that they are hunting him, and one of her goons has a profile of Saitama and is kind of surprised that they're going to look for him. But basically, they're like, this person, he increased in ranks so quickly, yet nobody's really giving him credit for anything that would have gotten him there. He's clearly suspicious. There's something behind him. We've got to figure out what it is. And then, like I said, I found it personally amusing the casualness of the home invasion that Saitama just like straight up was like, I was following you and I saw you running, and so I have decided to jump into your window and ask you about it with my 2 bags of groceries in my hands. Talk about playing the games, and then at the end, where he's actually playing with King and King's taking all the drops, even though it's supposed to be a cooperative game. And Saitama gets so annoyed by this that he just breaks the controller. A lot of little cute moments, but it was kind of like there was no dedicated villain or anything like that. It was very much, kind of similar to the opening of season 1, really, where it's just a series of little small villains to really remind us, oh yeah, these people, here's what they do for a living, this is what they're doing now. And then placing little hints and seeds that potentially will grow in the future. Overall, like I said, strong episode, not perfect, little bit not the best. Like, basically, we know that there will be better episodes, essentially, and that is why I'm giving it a conservative 8 out of 10, so that we leave room for improvements. But overall, like I said, not a bad episode at all. And so far, because it's the only one, in first place, Return of the Hero. And so we come to our series ranking so far. And our mostly objective ranking, season 1 ended with 88.33%, and season 2 so far is starting strong with 9 out of 120. And then we move on to the personal ranking, which ended with a score of 76.67% and has started with an 8 out of 120. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Punch Man Season 1, Episode 13, Return of the Hero. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.